Integrity is more than just an ethical thing. It's not just about being good and being ethical, but the more that we say and do the things that we actually believe, the more likely we are to attract people who believe what we believe. And that's how you and your ideas or whatever you're trying to do survive you, because it is no longer about you, it's about them. And this is where the danger of defining yourself by your work, which so many people do, which is our identities become tied to the job we do. So I am a public speaker. So what happens if I stop speaking publicly?
Right.
What happens to my identity? Because I made decisions a long time ago to define myself by who I am, not what I do, it allows me the freedom to stop doing anything I've done. I could stop public speaking. I could stop writing books. And that doesn't mean I won't spread my message. It means I'll find new ways to spread it. That's a scary thought for some people, for a lot of people, because accidentally they've commingled their identities with their work. I am a lawyer. I'm a doctor. So if you retire from being a doctor, who are you?
Yeah, totally.
Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and acting anyway.
Yep.
And then it raises the very interesting question, where does courage come from? And I do not for one minute believe that courage is a deep internal fortitude. I think courage is external, where you have the courage to jump out of a plane because there's a parachute on your back. It's the external thing that gave you the courage to jump out of the plane. I think the number of people who have courage to act without the love and compassion of those around them, the safety of those around them, it's probably more foolish than courageous.
I really concur, and I love that, and it makes me think about the times that blown up the path of the success deliberately. I think about the people that were there, even if I didn't really think about it at the time, the support system, the support group, and how vital it is to create that kind of community and network if you possibly can. I am here today with Simon Sinek. He sort of needs no introduction, really. I sort of imagine that anybody listening to the What's Essential podcast is at least familiar with Simon's work. You know, I hate to even say it this way, but number 2 TED Talk, it's got to be number 1 soon, Simon. He's got to be close now. He's blown up the internet on multiple occasions, but there's a millennials speech that's just gone bonkers, hundreds of millions of people. And really, I feel a sort of kinship between essentialism and the Start With Why movement. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Simon, welcome to the What's Essential podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start over with this. What question would you most like me not to ask?
Well, I wouldn't tell you that, would I?
But I still want you to. That's a good point, though, because a lot of people do tell me.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. Of course I'm not going to tell you. It's like, tell me your deepest, darkest secret that you don't want anyone to know. No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, is there one? Is there one that comes to mind? Even if
actually,
you don't share it?
there isn't. There isn't. I'm a pretty open book. So there actually isn't a question that comes to mind, if I'm honest.
Yeah. What's something essential to you right now that you're underinvesting in?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, it's about the essential for me that I'm underinvesting in is the pursuit of art, and I don't mean the buying of it. I mean the seeing of it. You know, COVID clearly put a big damper on that. But there are other ways to pursue art and see it and make it. And I like making art. And I like the process, even sometimes more than the result. And I miss it, if I'm honest. And so I think that's something that I could put more time and energy into.
There were a few elements of your answer. One was seeing it, one was making it. Which of the two are you most drawn to right now, or is it just both? You just wish you were seeing. What do you wish you were seeing?
Well, I think they're inextricably linked, right? I don't think I need inspiration, which comes from seeing how other people interpret the world, and then I make things, and that inspires me to go see things, which then inspires me to make things. And so I think it's a virtuous circle. So to say which one is more important, I think if I start with either one, the other one will follow.
I saw an interesting video clip the other day of Doctor Who. Are you a fan of Doctor Who? Have you ever watched Doctor Who?
Of course. Of course.
So there's a clip that I watched of where Doctor Who brings Van Gogh from his life into the future, into a beautiful gallery, an entire wing of the gallery devoted to his work. And he just gets to see people's reaction to it, and an art critic's description of him as perhaps the greatest artist who's ever lived and turned pain into beauty. And you get to see his reaction. And of course, it's as quirky as Doctor Who always is, but there's something very touching about being able to see what his response might be to the impact he's had when, of course, we know he died without any sense of the impact he would have.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, you're.
I saw that episode. I think that's, I mean, I think what we're talking about is contribution, right? Which is to wake up every day with a desire to leave this world in better shape than we found it. And some people will have a sense that their contribution, and some people won't. And I think the saddest one, actually, the most tragic one, is the people who have made a contribution and are aware of their contribution in their lifetime, but upon their death, it dissolves. I think
See,
that's the tragic one. I think that and I think about this, which is it's not enough for me to make a contribution for the time that I'm on the planet, but rather that I make decisions now that will allow whatever contribution I'm trying to make to survive me. And we talk about it. We talk about it at work. We talk about it, how this thing that we're building has to be bigger than me, and it can't be reliant on my personality. I'm frightfully aware of it.
I remember Stephen Covey once explaining a change in his life when a friend of him, who was a very well-respected speaker at the time, well-known and so on, he died. And when he died, as you just described, everything went with him.
Yeah.
And that was part of what inspired Stephen to actually get on and write the 7 Habits and to start a business at all and to create, what he saw as 100-year vision, something that would last, when he was well and truly gone. And it's interesting to reflect on it now with him having passed away maybe 10 years ago and to see that his contribution has continued. I was just speaking with one of his children, one of his daughters, about a book that she co-authored with him before he passed away, but she's carried on working on it over the last 10 years and it will soon come out. And it's pretty profound and powerful to think of something fully coming out that didn't, that will have his name on it, but that he has been, passed away 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This is all in alignment with what you're describing, I think.
In part it is. Um, uh, it's less about work that I'm working on that gets produced uh, after death. It's more that there's a momentum built from movement that others will continue it, not in my name, but in their own. And that to me is the hard part. Especially in this modern media rich world, it people wrap their messages around themselves, and that has value because you become the symbol of the movement, you become the symbol of the message. Oprah is the symbol of her message. uh, but the question is if you wrap it so tightly around a personality where it is only that person that carries that message alone, that when they pass on, um, who's inspired to carry it not for them but for themselves. And clearly Stephen Covey's daughter is doing it for her dad. you know I mean, it's his work in part. um, and so I think it's an interesting challenge for every single one of us. And by the way, it doesn't have to be some big lofty thing. It can be a contribution to a family. I mean, we all have a family member or a teacher. People have teachers who we can remember. If I ask you to, here, I will do it right now. Think of a teacher who took a particularly liking to you, who took you under their wing, who saw something in you that others didn't see. Tell me the name of that teacher.
Mrs. Sweet.
Okay, super quick and super easy, right? And now tell me every other teacher you've ever had since you went to school.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember, right? You can't remember all your teachers, but you remember the ones that for some reason had an impact on you. And I would argue that Mrs. Sweet, I don't know if she's still alive, but but even if she's, regardless of when her time has come, she has lived on beyond her own years. That there's a cadre of now adults who will admit that they are who they are in part because of this wonderful woman. That's what I mean about living on beyond your years, and that the values or lessons that she taught you, you will pass them on to your kids, your friends, your listeners, and it came from her. And that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be some big lofty thing, where you're an influencer, whatever the hell that means. Um, and but that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about of service. I'm talking about giving of self, of recognizing and seeing people and making people feel seen and heard and understood, that they carry something of you with them for the rest of their lives. That's what I mean to live on beyond your own life.
What trade-offs are you making to achieve, or at least to attempt to achieve, what you're describing?
Well, for many years, I knowingly sacrificed my personal life. I did it with eyes wide open. I spent a lot of time on the road, which affects how often I see my
Everything.
friends. It affects dating. I'd go on a date, meet a wonderful woman, and I'd say, "Oh my God, I had such a good time. Are you free in 6 weeks for a second date?" I did that with eyes wide open, and I made a deal with myself that I would do it until there was enough momentum that I didn't have to travel to that degree anymore, and then I would, sort of come back again. Um, um, but I think anyone, there's no. I think when you choose, when somebody chooses, I mean, Mrs. Sweet, I can guarantee you, you know, um, stayed up late to spend extra time with her on the papers she was grading, or stay at school late to spend extra time with the students who needed her. She made sacrifices, I'm sure. Maybe she passed up promotions because she would rather, be in the classroom. I don't know. Um,
Right.
um,
You're saying all contribution requires trade-off.
I think that there's no such but it's not always at the same time, right? I think it waxes and wanes, which is I'll give you an example. I'll give you an analogy, right? What does it take to be healthy? You have to exercise, you have to eat well, you have to maintain your personal relationships, you have to get enough sleep, you have to be mindful, you have to meditate, um, you have to breathe, and you can go through the list of things that you have to do to be a healthy person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely impossible to do all those things well all the time. None of us have the time or the bandwidth or the discipline. And necessarily, some of those things fall off occasionally. But it's okay, because they come and go and they come and go. And it's not about keeping them all amplified at the same time. It's about the journey. It's the same in a relationship. What does it take to be in a healthy relationship? Well, you have to be a good listener. You have to be present. You have to be thoughtful. And you just go through the long list of things. And you can't do all those things all the time. It's
Mm.
impossible. But that doesn't mean when you fall on one of them that the relationship collapses, because the others are there to hold it up. You know, which is why healthy relationships are dynamic. It's the same in business. What do you have to do in business? You have to do marketing. You have to do sales. You have to have, you have to have a strong culture. You have to have strong leadership. You have to make everybody in your company feel seen and heard. You have to be customer centric. You have to be profitable. And you can't do all those things all the time. And it's the journey. It's the pursuit. I think it's the pursuit of trying to maintain a balance of all of those things, and trying to, and sometimes one falls down and you're like, oh, I have to go back to that one. And then you put a lot of attention on that and something else falls down. And that's okay. And that's why we have friends, and that's why we have colleagues, and that's why we have coworkers, and we work together to keep those things up. Right. And that's when I think the stark realization comes, and the analogy is a perfect one. I think the stark realization comes that if we want to create a relationship, a business, a life that can survive us, that is strong, that we cannot do it alone, because all of these things absolutely are possible with help. And so there's a great irony in that the desire to leave this world, this classroom, these students, whatever it is, in better shape than you found them, this family, my kids, in better shape than we found them, necessarily requires support and help from others. And I love that. I love that irony that our own legacies are actually dependent on our ability to ask for help.
I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how it's difficult to even get clear about what you want without interaction with the people that matter to you. That there's that it's hard, even in my estimation, to find a thing that is truly independent. The things that seem independent, once you get into them, are really interdependent. Have you found that with helping people find their why, that it's an inherently interdependent process, or is it something you think people can find, really on their own?
I'm not going to be pig-headed about it and say you absolutely cannot do it alone,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it is very, 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 very difficult to do alone.
Mm.
And it's because none of us are objective about ourselves. And when you're asking someone for help, I tend to recommend to people not to ask a sibling or a parent or a spouse, because those relationships are so close that sometimes they think they know better than you do, and also lack
Mm.
objectivity.
Mm.
And so sometimes working with a stranger is wonderful because they bring nothing to the table except the data you give them. But a friend works just fine. Someone who wants to help you, or a colleague who wants to help you find your why. But in my experience, asking for help to find your why is much easier and much more rewarding, and probably much more accurate. I, 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 you know, yeah, I think that there'd be an extreme kind of personality, or maybe a near-death experience, that would help somebody have that kind of objectivity. But otherwise, I think asking for help is the way to do it. And again, learning one's own why requires help. Finding out who you are requires support from others. And then what you discover about your whys, that's you actually live in service. All whys are selfless. All whys are about contribution. Every single one of them. And I like that. It's the value we provide to the world. It's the value we provide to the people in our lives. And the rub is that the thing we give to the world is also the thing we need the most. And that's the difficulty of living, of starting with why. So
Can,
goes
can,
back
can
to
you unpack that a little bit for us?
sure. I'll be specific. So my why is to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. So together, each of us can change our world for the better. Right? That's what I give to the world. When I talk to my friends, like, the greatest compliment someone can give me that gives me goosebumps is, "You inspired me." You
Mm.
know, the word inspire, like, lights me up. I would have that tattooed on my body. I would have it permanently connected to me. That would make me feel fine. Um, um, but at the same time, I need inspiration. I need to be inspired. So the thing that I give to the world is the thing that I need the most. So, depending whatever your why is, to support others, so that dot dot dot, those people more than must be supported. And that's the hard thing about the why. It is a contribution, but it's also a deep seated need.
Mm.
Uh, so you have to be able to be the one who helps, but ask for help as well for the same thing.
And your sources of inspiration, I'm assuming that that's part of what this art theme is for you, that it's part of the rejuvenation of your own of your own inspiration, um, you know, container, for want of a better word. What else inspires you? Where do you go in order to get rejuvenated, to fill that container?
Well, I mean, it's not so unusual. I mean, like everybody, I mean, spending time with loved ones and feeling loved and seen and heard, and you know, all of that does wonders for the human psyche. And I think that's not unique to me. I think that's consistent for all people. Like, when we're in loving friendships and have loving relationships with our families, or whatever it is, wherever it comes from, um, I think that is inspirational. Um, Now, personally, because there are personal things, I get great inspiration from artists, as you said, but also from folks who wear a uniform, from those in military. Some of my closest friends who inspire me tremendously, they're all part of this volunteer force. And what I've learned over the course of time is that those in the military and artists are basically the same person, right? Both of them feel that what they do is more of a calling than anything else.
Yeah, they're not doing it to get paid.
They're not, and that's the second part, which is none of them went into the profession thinking they were going to get rich. None of them. They all knew that they weren't, right? There's intense camaraderie. They both make sacrifices for that to be a part of this pursuit, right? And 100% of the benefit of their product goes to someone else. You know?
Yeah, there's more similarity there than would be obvious.
Yeah. And so, I find that I'm drawn to artists, and I find that I'm drawn to folks in the military for the exact same reasons, because they're very, very similar personality types. And it's that intense camaraderie and that intense willingness to give so that others may benefit, that I find very, very inspiring. I can be brought to tears just hearing stories of sacrifice.
It seems to me that the work you're doing, I mean, it's intense work for you. And I don't mean just the speaking or the interviews or even the writing and so on. I don't really mean the surface work. I mean, underneath that, as I'm listening to you today, I'm trying to find the right word for it, but it's like, it's deep for you. It's serious for you. Am I right? Where am I getting that close?
Well, I think if you do anything that's a personal pursuit, it has some seriousness to it. Now, I take very seriously that I joke around at work that we can do serious things, but we don't have to take ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
I certainly do not take myself seriously,
Yeah.
and have a very clear sense of some of the folly of some of the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Like what?
I mean, like I sort of I have very mixed feelings about uh, giving the people who are the vessels for these messages more credit than they deserve. And look, you and I both know people who write books and give talks, and they write a good story, and then you get them behind the scenes, and they care about how much money they're making. What's your, I joined this. I was invited to be a part of this mastermind group. They called themselves, of like-minded folks who did similar things to sort of talk about how they could cooperate to, advance the greater good. And I thought, ooh, sign me up. Sounds great, And I showed up, and all these folks in the room, some of whom, people would know, all they talked about was how they can increase their margins and how they can share their lists. And, you want to do a kickback scheme, and can I borrow your list? And can you borrow my list? And I spoke up and said, I thought we came here to talk about how we can cooperate for the greater good. All you guys are talking about is your own selfish pursuits. Needless to say, they didn't invite me back. But that's what I mean by the folly, which is there are some out there who truly are consistently authentic to their messages. And so, there are some who were, and then after their first book gave them some notoriety, they forgot,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And
You're describing vanity, I think.
I'm describing the frailty of human beings that we're all susceptible to. Every single one of us is susceptible to it. And I think that goes back to human relationships, right? Which is, do we have relationships in our lives that are strong enough to have somebody go up to us and say, what the hell? Like, you're not the person you pretend to be, and gives that person an opportunity to sort of look at themselves in a mirror, um, um, so there is folly to this world, to this stuff, and I would argue that some of those people are the ones that their messages will die with them, because they made it about them. We're getting very philosophical here.
Well, I think it's real. I mean, I don't want to name names either, but there are definitely people that there's one person in particular who every so often I will go, oh, I need some inspiration. And there's many different sources for that. But occasionally I think, oh, I just would like a bit of that person's inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go to their website, and I can't last 10 minutes because I just they it's a difficult dance here that I'm trying to expect of them, but they can't seem to get out of their own way. If in order to share the message, I have to absorb them. They sort of have to enter with the message, and it just there's something wrong about that. I mean, a teacher isn't trying to enter you. A teacher is trying to share something they've found that they're grappling with too, that they're trying to learn. And when it becomes one and the same, when they're trying to sort of, I am the answer type
Right.
approach,
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
find that is a very particular sensation.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to really separate that, but I think it's really important. That seems at least similar to what you're describing in this
Yeah, I
mastermind.
think that that's definitely a part of it. I am the solution, or I have all the solutions, is definitely part of it. I'll be more tangible. One of my pet peeves is somebody who puts out a good message and is a genuinely good message and all the good things, and you show up their website and you can't use the website until you give them your email. Get this free content, but give us your email first.
Hmm.
It's a bait and switch. They're not trying to give you something for free. They're trying to get your email to add to their list so they can market to you, right? Um, you could give something away for free and then say, if you like this, please sign up for more. That's legit, right? Where you earn an email as a reward for putting out good free content. um, but to say you cannot have my content until you give me your email, to me is disingenuous and motivated by the wrong things. you know but maybe I'm an idiot. I could be, but maybe I'm the one with the smaller list who, if I just did those tricks, that I would be able to get my message out to more people. Maybe I'm the idiot. But for me, there's an integrity component. That if I offer something for free, it should be legitimately for free, which no cost doesn't have to be money. you know Cost can be an email address. It's costing somebody something. And so if you genuinely want to give something away for free, then put it up on a website and ask for nothing. um, um, and that to me is more consistent with at least the message I'm trying to spread. And it goes back to the golden circle. I talk about what you do proves what you believe. you know and so even going early back into the early days, when I remember this, my first test. So in Start With Why, I wrote about this thing that I call the Celery Test. God, I haven't talked about this in a long time. This is fun. um, so the Celery Test is a simple metaphor about sort of how a why works and for decision making, right? So we're all constantly looking for advice and ideas on how we can be better people, build a better business, whatever the thing is, right? And the question is, which advice do you follow? And so I liken it to going to out for dinner with a group of friends and strangers. Go to someone's house for dinner, and you meet someone at the party, and they say to you, "You know what you need in your business? You need to be using M&Ms. We made so much money using M&Ms." And somebody else says to
Hmm.
you, "In this economy, it's all about oat milk. You've got to get into oat milk." And somebody else
Hmm.
says to you, "Absolutely not. It's all about Kit Kats. The more we've done so well using Kit Kats." And somebody else says to you, "Absolutely not. Celery. You have to use celery." It's all perfectly good advice from perfectly good people with perfectly good case studies to demonstrate that their advice is right because it worked for them. But the question is, which products do you buy? So you go to the supermarket and you buy everything, right? You buy M&Ms, Kit Kats, oat milk, and celery. And the question is, which do you get benefits from? You might get benefits from some of them. You don't really know. You spent a lot of money. You spent a lot of time at the supermarket. Now, let's go back to that same dinner with a sense of cause, with a sense of why. Let's say our why is to be healthy and only do the things that protect the health of our bodies. Now
Hmm.
the question is, which products do you buy? It's so obvious. You only buy oat milk and celery. Those are the only ones that make sense. And so
Hmm.
you spend less time at the supermarket, you spend less money at the supermarket. But here's the best part. Before, when you were standing in the line to pay, you had celery and Kit Kats and oat milk and M&Ms in your arms, and nobody knew what you stood for, and they walked right past you. Now, when you're standing in the line, you only have celery and oat milk in your basket, and people can see what you believe. They can say, "Hey, look, you're healthy. So am I. Congratulations." That's called scale. Because when you say and do the things you actually believe, people know what you stand for, and you are much more likely to attract people who believe what you believe, and that's how you build the army. And
Yeah.
so integrity is more than just an ethical thing. It's not just about being good and being ethical, but the more that we say and do the things that we actually believe, the more likely we are to attract people who believe what we believe. And that's
Mm.
how you and your ideas or whatever you're trying to do survive you, because it is no longer about you, it's about them.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, you're saying that the clearer you are about your why, you know, getting clear about your why is one decision that makes 1,000 decisions, because
Correct.
it all coalesces together. In your own life, it does, because you can keep making decisions that are consistent, but it's this interdependent experience that you're adding to that, which is that people will be attracted. The right people will be attracted to you. The wrong people, so to speak, will not be. They'll say, well, that's not for me.
Correct.
And they'll go their own way. I remember when I was at business school, I was in a class with called the Strategic Management of Nonprofits, and everyone was asked to identify and name their, well, they would, our task was to go away and find a couple of vision and mission statements from various nonprofits, come back, and we were going to share that with the class. So you've got maybe 70 people in the class, so there's like 140 of these, and we start reading them, and it basically makes people laugh, because they're either so general you don't know what they mean, they're just sort of corporate speak, or sometimes they would be clear but so unachievable. You'd have like a 7-person organization that would say, well, we're going to solve world hunger. And everyone just like, no, that isn't what you're going to do, so that's not real. Then somebody said, well, I've got Brad Pitt's here. And because of the sensation in the classroom, everyone was sort of laughing by this point. And they read it out. They said, the intent of our organization is to build 250 storm resistant homes in the 8th district of New Orleans by this date. And it just took the oxygen out of the room, because everybody knew in that moment that that was real, that
Hmm.
that was clear. You would know, and this is what made me think of it from what you were saying, you would know sitting there whether that was an organization you wanted to work with. You'd know, if you were the most junior person hired there, how to help. You'd know whether what you were doing was supporting or taking away from the mission, even if you were trying to do something good. But
Yeah.
that type of clarity, my goodness, I think it's the rarest thing in the world. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's finite though, right? It's eminently achievable, and then what happens after they achieve that goal? Do they shut the doors? And they may say that may be the case, which is they may say we have a finite goal, which is once we achieve this, our mission is over, and we'll shut the doors. However, if they have a more infinite vision, you know, they may say we believe everyone on the planet should have a safe place to live. I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way we're going to do it is first by building 250 homes in the 8th district of New Orleans, right? And so you can see there's a driving belief, and that they've picked a very realistic goal to advance that belief. And upon achieving that milestone, we expect them to choose another milestone and another milestone and another milestone, and maybe those milestones will get bigger and bigger as they become more recognized and better funded. But all the time being driven by an infinite pursuit that is, for all intents and purposes, unachievable. And so, it's good to have finite goals. It's important, and they have to be grounded in some sort of reality, even if they push us and stretch us. But the context within which those visions exist, again, unless the organization is a finite organization, which is upon achievement, we will shut the doors, which is
Mm-hmm.
totally fine as well.
Yes.
But I have to believe that those who are driven by cause, um, that those who are there are attracted to a higher, and maybe the people who joined, somebody was working in homelessness, but so in other words, that underlying belief that everyone deserves a safe home to live attracted them. But then the thing that they're actually working on is building houses in the 8th ward in New Orleans, the 8th parish in New Orleans, that they're like, oh, that definitely advances my cause, even though I'm not doing the thing that I used to be doing. So I think yes, and
It's both.
it's
Yeah,
both,
you're saying
correct.
you need an infinite vision plus a metric that's
But
that's clear.
the infinite vision is not we're trying to build a home for everyone in the world, because that's stating it as a goal,
Right.
which is, to your point, completely ridiculous and unachievable,
Mm.
right? But to say we believe everyone deserves a safe home to live in means we are doing a part of that work, and we expect others to do a part of that work. I spoke at a conference of all of the heads of development for for, I don't know, 1,000, 1,200 charities, who knows what, right?
Mm.
And I remember I came out on the stage and I said, part of my opening remarks were, at least 50% of the people in this room, your organizations deserve to go out of business.
Mm.
Because you've completely forgotten the plot. You've become obsessed with money. And worse, you refuse to work with each other. Like, explain to me why two organizations that believe in stamping out cancer don't cooperate. Explain that to me. You claim to be in the do-good business and that you literally see the other group as your competition. And we accept that there's a finite amount of money, and we accept there's a finite amount of, and so you literally are trying to steal people away for your fundraising event away from their fundraising event. Why not work together? Doesn't that make more sense to help stamp out cancer? But it goes back to the conversation we had before about those personalities where they forgot the plot and they made it about themselves. So too do so many not-for-profit organizations forget the plot and make it about themselves. There's that Charity Navigator website that I love that grades charities, and it's astonishing how many charities that are pretty well, and again, they shall remain nameless, but
Mm.
I know who some of them are. They're very well known and well recognized charities, that such a small percentage of the money raised actually goes to the cause they're trying to advance, and they get poor grades, deservedly. And the question is, they become self-licking ice creams. They become more interested in their own survival rather than advancing their causes.
Self-licking ice creams. I haven't heard that before, but it's an interesting idea. Tell me this. Earlier on, we were talking about trade-offs that you were currently making in order to be able to achieve your own stated vision of trying to make a contribution that seriously outlives you. And you gave an example of a trade-off you've made in the past
Mm-hmm.
to do that. But what are you doing right now? What trade-offs are you making? I'm sort of assuming things like in the way that you run your business. I mean, you've given a small illustration of that with, I'm not going to say, hey, here's something for free, but you have to sign up first. It's a subtle thing, but it does speak volumes about what we'll do and what we won't do in pursuit of this vision. So that would be maybe an example. What else are you doing in order to make this vision real for you?
So people and ideas get stale, and I think that we have to adapt in changing times. Cultures, politics, and tastes and technology change, and things that were acceptable in the 1950s are no longer acceptable, or things that were funny in the 1950s are no longer funny, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And when you build a movement or build a business or build anything, even a museum or a dance company, you're not putting these things in formaldehyde and protecting the foundation, the origins at all costs, because you become irrelevant. And so I think that anybody who's trying to advance anything has to be willing to take a deep breath and blow it up every now and then.
Mm.
And to some, COVID was that mechanism that blew it up for them if they didn't have the courage to do it themselves, which allowed for reinvention.
Was that true for you?
Yes, that was true for our business.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure it was, because I
COVID,
assume
most of our money came from live
events,
workshops and things.
workshops,
And
even keynotes to some
all that
extent.
stuff. And so COVID blew that up, of course.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing opportunity to say, great, well, let's take advantage of everything that's available now that we weren't taking advantage of before, and let's make it even more scalable, and let's get the message out even more, and that was a great opportunity. But for me personally, it's different, right? So I look back at my own career, and there's a funny pattern that, like, I started in advertising and I did really well and got promoted, and then once I reached a level where it was like boring, I quit.
Yep.
And I'd go work some shitty account at some lesser agency, and it'd either work or it won't, and I'd build it up, or it would fail, and I'd be like, all right, and I'd leave. And I remember I left a I left Ogilvy and Mather, which was at the time
Yeah.
one of the most respected agencies in the world.
Yeah. I've done work with Ogilvy.
And and I was on some, and they when I decided to leave, they offered me all these illustrious accounts, IBM, American Express, Kodak. They said, Simon, you can work on any one of these you want. And I went and worked for a lesser agency on wasn't a glamorous account, Oppenheimer funds. I mean, mutual funds, really,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And nobody could understand why I wouldn't take the offer to go work on these glamorous accounts, to go work on this sort of less glamorous account. That was, and I explained to them, because all the heavy lifting's already been done. Like, you're going to give me a job where I get to do maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to do maintenance. And so I took risks with my career, and it didn't always work out, by the way. But I took risks with my career. When things were going really well, I'd leave and start over again. And I'm in that process right now.
Mm-hmm.
The way I was doing things and the way I think I want to do things, and I don't have perfect clarity as to what will come next. So I'm in a position of discovery and reinvention, which is exciting and nerve wracking. But when you ask specifically about the sacrifice is pace, right? I necessarily have to slow down and pull back before I can speed up again. I got to find my footing, and I got to find the vehicle. In other words, if I'm changing from this car to that car, I have to stop the car, get out of this car, and get into that car. And I'm losing. Like, I could be racing down the highway, and I'm stopped, right? It's like when people, are on long car journeys and they like to keep track of how long it takes. Stopping for gas, you want to do
It's
it
the
as quickly as
worst.
possible, because you destroy the time.
Totally.
20 minutes of standing here, it could have been, how many miles could I have driven in 20 minutes?
Yeah.
And I do that knowingly. So I'm in a position right now of trying to figure out which car to get into, and I'm fully aware that I'm not racing down the highway. So people ask me, what are you writing? And the answer is, I'm not writing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like,
I'm
you're not writing anything?
I'm
No, I'm
thinking.
not writing anything. I'm thinking, and I'm putting together patterns, and I'm trying to find, and so the sacrifice, there's an expectation that when you have when you're in a certain level in your career, that you have to maintain that pace all the time.
Mm.
And I think that's where I think people get into trouble, where either the work gets stale or they get tired, and then either way, it's going to collapse. And so I think the challenge of reinvention, and this goes for individuals as well as organizations, is such a good one and so necessary, because the world changes, and we have to change with it. We have to adapt. We have to find new ways, better ways, more fun ways, more efficient ways, whatever it is, to spread our message, to advance our cause, that keeps us interested and keeps those around us interested. And I think people are afraid, when you're running on a hamster wheel, you think it's you who's setting the pace, and sometimes you don't realize that you're just trying to keep up. And the fear of
Yes.
stepping off the hamster wheel is horrible. So my sacrifice right now is pace.
I relate to everything you're describing here. First of all, the necessity to blow up success at a certain point in the cycle. I'm thinking of all sorts of examples of that. I'm thinking Steve Jobs when he comes back to Apple, and there's like a veritable museum at Apple with all of their greatest hits. The original Mac and the mouse and all of these things that are really genuinely impressive. And he takes them all and he donates them, I think, to Silicon Valley Museum. But he just literally gets rid of them all, so that as a signal to everybody, it doesn't matter what we did before. It really could hold us back enormously if we keep thinking about that, and if we keep trying to replay that, or if we use that to make ourselves feel good that we've done good things. And so the innovation, now is less important, and all of that. So I think that that's sort of one level of
Yeah.
alignment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're trying to do. It sounds like it's somewhat of necessity, but it's not like necessity, necessarily that somehow the customers or people around you are saying, hey, listen, it's time for something new. It's your own internal sense of this feels, you used the word stale, so I don't want to now, double down on that. That's not the right word, but it's a sense within you that you say, this isn't this. I'm living on a momentum from somewhere before, and I need to make decisions now to create a new wave of momentum,
It,
a
it's
new
it,
phase of what I'm trying to do.
it's a choice, and it's I don't that choice I it's done without judgment. And what I mean is, if other people make a different choice, I think that's fine. They both have value, right? This is a choice I've made for my life or my career, but I don't judge the choices that other people make for their lives or their careers. Like I said, they both have value. They're different kinds of value. And so after I wrote Start With Why, I could have serialized it. I could have done Start With Why
For
for
teens,
veterinarians, and
for
Start With Why for
families.
teens, and Start With Why for families, and I could have kept writing Start With Why books and sold a lot of books, and built an enterprise of Start With Why, and even when Start With Why came out, people called me the Why guy,
Yes,
and
you
uh,
didn't want that
no, and
because it
so,
would have fixated you there. It would have kept you
and
there.
again, I don't, for those who have made that decision and serialized their own work, very often the reason it got serialized is because it's good work.
Sure.
And there was demand for all of the verticals and variations, and I know there's demand for verticals and variations for my work. I mean, on our website we offer Find Your Why courses, and we have done them in verticals because we have practitioners from those verticals. So we have Start With Why for healthcare, and Start With Why for teachers, and Start With Why for artists, because that way the room is filled with people like you as you're looking for your cause. Like we've done that, you know. So and because there's but I never serialized the work, because that was a decision I made. I wanted to learn new things. And I remember, when I wrote Leaders Eat Last, my publisher showed me the designs for the cover, and it looked exactly like Start With Why. It was like Leaders Eat Last, and I was like, wait, why is this? It's a completely different book with a completely different idea set. Why are you making it look the same? Like, well, Simon, this is how we build a brand. I'm like, nah, man, that's not how you build a brand. Making my cover look the same. But even the publishers are tempted to serialize it, and so one of the nice things about having success from one book is I get to say no. I had very little say on the cover design of the first book, but the second book. um, so yeah, so I wanted it to be entirely different. And like there's a couple of funny little things that only I know, but they make me smile, which is every book I've published is a different size. So none of them stack up next to each other neatly.
You did that deliberately.
Yeah. And every book is a different size for a different reason, because a different size has a different feel, right? So Find Your Why is big because I want it to feel like a workbook, because that's what it is, right? And Infinite Game is long. It's a longer
Yeah.
book because I want it to feel more like a manifesto.
I've noticed what you're describing. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was deliberate.
Yeah, it's deliberate. Leaders Eat Last is like a fat book because it's a dense sort of pursuit. Start With Why is a relatively small size because I wanted it to fit under your arm and throw it in your briefcase. It's not to be put on a shelf and kept behind glass. It's supposed to be used and abused and dog-eared. You know, Together is Better is horizontal because it's a sweet little book inspired by a children's book. I mean, they're all different for different reasons. And like I was thinking about something new, a new project, and I was like, okay, it's not gratuitous. Like if I realize it needs to be the same size as one of the others, I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's always based on whatever the book's trying to communicate, that I try and match the size of the book to the feeling of the book. But yeah, but it's only I knew that. I guess more people know it now. But because for me, it goes back to intention, which is like I said before, I want the book to feel like what it is. And these are subtle little things that most people won't recognize, but they would know if it wasn't there. Like if I made Start With Why a fat book, it wouldn't feel right because it's not that kind of book. Or if I made Infinite Game more squared, It's not. It's not how it is. You know. So yeah, it's same with color and touch. All of them have it's called. I've forgotten what it's called, but it feels more like skin than paper. Because
Yeah.
I wanted all my books to have humanity to them.
Hmm.
You know, and so the new books, Leaders Eat Last and Infinite Game, they both have this. They called soft touch on the cover, because I want it to have a humanity to it. I mean, silly little things like this.
Yeah, but you say silly, but these are still, it's attention to detail, but that doesn't quite capture it. It's being deliberate and thoughtful about the choices that you're making and the trade-offs that you're making, so that you don't just get stale, so that you don't just live in momentum. I mean, I remember Bill Gates saying that success is a very poor teacher. And I think that, at least to me, feels aligned with what you're saying, because instead of just doing what success tells you to do, okay, more of what I've been doing, more of the same things, you have to go back to clarity. You have to go back and say, what is this really about? What am I really supposed to do next? What is the right thing to do? And you're guided not even by the momentum, which is very easy to be guided by momentum, all the way up and all the way down. And instead, you're saying, okay, let's go back. What do I feel is the right thing to do? What does my conscience counsel me to do? What is the right next thing for me to do? Or at least, let's say it this way, one of the original philosophers used to talk about one of the reasons that he felt he became wise is because he had a demon he always used to listen to. That was his term for it. Somebody listening to this will remember that it was Plato or Socrates, and I don't remember now. But he that was his name, and what he meant for that demon was that demon wouldn't tell him what to do. That demon would tell him what not to do. And as he listened to that demon, it would guide him what paths not to take.
Mm.
And I see something of that demon in what you're describing. I mean, we tend to think of demons as inherently bad, but I mean, I think he's just saying, animating a voice within. But there's something countercultural in the voice that you're talking about and listening to inside of you. You're not even advocating it to other people. There's such an unusual path. Some of these decisions are so different to what maybe other people should do or have done. But for you, you're saying, I have to get back to that. And I'm doing it right now. I'm in a state of reinvention right now. And I don't know what that means, but I know it means I'm not just going to be doing what I've done before.
Yeah,
That's not right.
I think there's some elements of truth. I don't know what to do, but I do know what not to do.
Yeah.
And what not to do is what I've been doing.
Right.
And and this is where the danger of defining yourself by your work, which so many people do, which is our identities become tied to the job we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a public speaker. So
Right.
so what happens if I stop speaking publicly? What
Right.
happens to my identity? Well, I've been aware of that for a while. And so if you notice, whenever I blurb a book, every time it says Simon Sinek, optimist and author of, because I never want to be defined by what I've done. I want to be defined by who I am. And regardless of if I stop speaking, stop writing, stop doing any things that people may know me for, I'm always an optimist till the day I die. And so I am, because I made decisions a long time ago to define myself by who I am, not what I do. And um, it allows me the freedom to stop doing anything I've done. So I could stop public speaking. I could stop writing books. And that doesn't mean I won't spread my message. It means I'll find new ways to spread it. But that's a scary thought for some people, for a lot of people, because accidentally they've commingled their identities with their work. I am a lawyer. I'm a doctor. So if you retire from being a doctor, who are you?
Yeah, totally.
And you
Yeah.
see this a lot. You see this a lot with very successful people, which is they're so intertwined with their work that when they retire, or they have an identity crisis, and they try and live in the past, remember when I did that? I was the first person to do this. I was the first person to do that. Well, that was 30 years ago. It's like, this is not true anymore. And so I mean, no disrespect to JetBlue Airlines. I just know this from a while ago. Like JetBlue was the first one to put leather seats in and a TV on every seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I remember there were many years later where they kept advertising leather seats. You know, we were the first to put leather seats in and like TVs in every seat. Like, but every plane had leather seats and TVs in every seat. And I was like, who cares? Yes, you were the pioneer. Wonderful. Credit to you. But now it's a commodity. You know, you're not so special anymore. And so you're going to have to reinvent. You can't just live on the past, because the past, you set this new thing in motion, but now it's, congratulations, it worked. You know?
We're just celebrating the past now.
Celebrating the past. And
instead of innovating now.
And trying to figure out the next thing that you're going to figure out. You know, similar to the story you recount, Elizabeth Gilbert gave a TED Talk of a similar ilk, where she says in the pre-Renaissance, there was the belief that there's a daemon, which is an alternative spelling for demon, but daemon living in the walls. And if you did something great, people would say of you, you had your genius. Your genius was this power, this figure. Your genius was a daemon that lived in the walls. And if you did something, people would say you had your genius. So you couldn't take full credit for it. And if something collapsed, you'd say, oh, you didn't have your genius. They didn't have their genius with them, you know? And so you weren't completely faulted for your failures. And somewhere in the Renaissance, it went from having your genius to being a genius. And now when somebody does something great, they go, oh, she's a genius, right?
Right.
And now for those people who are labeled by others or labeling themselves, which is more egregious, but if labeled by others as geniuses, now they have the intense pressure.
It's terrifying.
Of needing to make everything brilliant, which is impossible. And every failure then rips them off the pedestal.
Right.
And that stress is unbearable. And I remember when I wrote my second book, people would ask me, how are you going to write a second book as popular as the first?
Yeah.
Or how are you going to give another TED Talk as famous as the first TED Talk? And my answer was, I won't. Because what are you kidding? I didn't plan the spreading of the start with why thing. I won the lottery, you know? And so you're asking me how am I going to choose more lottery numbers and make as much and hit the bonus jackpot as much as I hit the first jackpot? I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, that's not going to happen. And I have no pressure on myself to repeat the thing that I didn't even plan on doing in the first place. And Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk about the daemon living in the wall took all the pressure off of me when I wrote my second book, because, you know, everybody's sophomore attempt is usually the shitty album, you know, because the pressure you had, because you spent 10 years writing the first one and you spent a year writing the second one, and everybody wants you to make the second one better than the first one, which is impossible. And so I took no credit for the first. I didn't take all the credit. I took a lot less credit for the first. And then all I had to do was sit down and write a great book based on the merits of this one book, completely ignorant of whatever happened before it. And that was a huge help to me. It was a huge benefit to recognize that sometimes it's with you and sometimes it's not. And if it's with you, great. You can't take all the credit. And when it wasn't with you, it's okay. You can't beat yourself up entirely. You know?
Well, and just connecting all the dots here, you'd said a moment ago that this could be scary for people. You know, someone might find this sort of a terrifying proposition to blow things up before they have to and so on, as if it isn't for you. And I just want to challenge that a little bit, because what I sense in you is, one, that it does make you feel quite comfortable. There is a part of you that goes, yes, this is the way I do it. This is what feels right to me. This is what the demon says not to do, and I'm following it, so I have that. So there is something that feels quite at peace as I'm listening to you. But the second side of it is, that doesn't mean that it doesn't require courage. It does require courage. It is requiring courage. And I can sense that in you as you say, I don't have the answers. I just know I'm not going to just carry on doing what I've been doing. So I'm making that choice. It does require courage. Innovation requires courage, and I personally relate to it. I I say that I'm sort of going through a renaissance in my life right now, and my teenage children are like, I think you might mean midlife crisis, and I don't know exactly who's right or who's wrong with it, but I know that sensation many times over in my life of blowing something up. That's too negative of a connotation, but definitely saying I'm not going to continue doing this even though it's successful.
I mean,
We'll say that.
we can be more romantic about it than blowing it up. It's changing routes, you know. But don't give me too much credit. The you know, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage
Yeah.
is being afraid and acting anyway.
Yep.
And then it raises the very interesting question: where does courage come from?
Yeah.
And I do not for 1 minute believe that courage is a deep internal fortitude. Dig down deep and find the courage. I don't think that's the case. I think courage is external, where you have the courage to jump out of a plane because there's a parachute on your back. Like, it's the external thing that gave you the courage to jump out of the plane. You know, so there's not a foolishness to reinvention. It's not gratuitous. A world famous trapeze artist would never try a brand new death-defying act for the first time without a net,
Mm.
no matter how skilled they are. It's the net that gave them the courage. Because when you push boundaries, necessarily you're going to fall. And so the courage to reinvent requires really good relationships. And I would not be able to do or have done any of the reinventions or challenges that I've put to myself without a group of people around me who say, we believe in you, who say, if everything goes south, we'll still be there with you. We got your back. You got to do this. Because the days I hesitate, they go, you have to do this.
Mm.
And it's the quality of the friendships and the quality of my business partners and my team that give me the courage to change routes, blow it up, find a new direction, stop the car, whatever analogy we want to use. And if I didn't have them, I wouldn't do it, because it would be just too overwhelmingly scary. And I think the number of people who have courage to act without the love and compassion of those around them, the safety of those around them, it's probably more foolish than courageous.
Yeah, I really concur, and I love that, and it makes me think about the times that I have blown up the path or the success deliberately, and as soon as you say that, I think about the people that were there, even if I didn't really think about it at the time. The support system, the support group, and how vital it is to create that kind of community and network if you possibly can. Once worked with somebody, coached them many years ago, who seemed terrified every day when they went to work, and every decision was fatiguing for them. And I got listening to them for a bit, and why, why is it so awful? And what it turned out to be is that she had no parents alive, no siblings, no, there was no church she was going to, there was no community that way. She had just enough money she's living paycheck to paycheck, so she is constantly in her mind, and probably literally true, that she's 2 weeks from being homeless at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing stands in such contrast to that type of situation. So if you can build a community, build a network, uh, become involved in groups that can help establish that, build family, value family wherever you possibly can, so that you are making, let's say, failure cheaper, making the downsides less deep, so that it isn't foolish, even if it maybe sometimes could appear to people to be. Simon, it's really been fun to talk today, at least for me, and I valued your openness. and I am so genuinely curious and interested to see what the what will come next, and what the invention will be.
Well, that makes two of us.
Simon Sinek, thanks so much for being on the What's Essential podcast.
Thanks for having me. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.